Friends, today we get to sit down with the great Tim Lerch, jazz guitarist, performer, educator, and a YouTube phenomenon with his great demos of pickups and playing styles, and he was in town for a seminar, a guitar seminar, and we happened to hook up, and we decided that we were going to do this, and so thank you, Tim, for making some time to sit down with us here in the lounge.
Thank you. I'm so pleased to be here in the hallowed halls. So many of my heroes have sat in this seat, and I'm really happy to be here.
When we met for the first time in person, you said that I was much bigger in real life, and because of that, I'm not gonna give you the easy interview. This is gonna be. I've got a little bit of an axe to grind.
All right, so, come on, baby.
Yeah. So, of all the guitar styles that you could get into, why did you get into jazz when, of course, that I'm kidding. I'm just giving you a hard time.
I have an answer for that question.
Okay, go ahead.
Because I don't like crowds.
That's why you got into jazz.
I'm uncomfortable around people.
No, but seriously, what is it that got you into jazz? Because, most people would get into the Beatles or other things, and then they would kind of make their route. They somehow they get pulled into jazz. So what pulled you into jazz?
I just loved it. First time I heard, Charlie Parker, my brain exploded. I really felt hard for Art Tatum and Tiny Grimes. I heard jazz guitar in the form of Tiny Grimes. I bought this record. I don't know exactly why. I was probably 15 or maybe 14 years old. I'd been playing guitar for a while, and I liked pop music and blues, and I really liked the Beano album and, all that stuff, Layla record and those things. Then I got this Art Tatum record. Art Tatum was this fantastic piano player from the 40s, and he had this guy who played a tenor guitar with a Charlie Christian pickup on his ES 150 tenor, and he played really beautiful stuff, and kind of Charlie Christian-esque, but a little more bluesy, and his name was Tiny Grimes. And then that led to other players of that ilk. I just got the bug, and I really love George Barnes. Have you ever heard George Barnes?
Yeah,
George Barnes is my favorite early jazz guitar player, and unfortunately often overlooked. But he could play melodies so beautifully, and he had a joyous style, And then Charlie Christian sort of overshadowed him a little bit because he was so great.
Right.
But I really liked the sort of rock skimming over. How if you throw a rock on a flat, it's go. And I felt like jazz was the musical equivalent of that feeling I got.
Skipping over the top of the bar.
Right. And so the rhythm would be swinging, and the solos would be just skipping over the top and floating.
Yeah. That's a great picture.
I just loved it, And when I was that age, what was my friends, my cohort were listening to pop music of the day, and I liked some of it, but I didn't like a lot of it. It didn't really resonate with me. The sort of hard rock stuff I didn't like much. I didn't have the right attitude for it. I liked the opening solo to All the Young Dudes, and I liked the solo on Killer Queen. And to me, that was like melodies played cleanly on the guitar, and I like Peter Frampton, because and I found out later that he was a jazz guy disguised as a rocker, and so that's what I gravitated toward. And then little funny anecdote, I had this sound in my head, and I don't know, for the longest time I didn't know where it came from, and then I watched a rerun of the Beverly Hillbillies, which I used to watch very religiously when I must have been 5 years old. And then Ellie Mae comes on the scene, or they open up the doors to the mansion and you hear something like, and then, or whatever, and Elliot made, in the cement pond or whatever. That was a guy named, I found out later, a guy named Perry Botnick.
Yeah.
And he played beautifully. But I didn't know what it was at that time. So Perry Botnick, unknown guy, really great guitar player in the Beverly Hillbillies.
And it's interesting because that show was this, the fish out of water. That was the whole point of the Beverly Hillbillies, was you had the fish out of water. Right. It was the hillbillies in Beverly Hills.
Yeah.
And they would have, at times you would have these, obviously the theme song was, Flat and Scruggs, doing banjo bluegrass thing. But then it was interesting in that you have the mansion and you have these moments of jazz guitar playing in there. And it just kind of, you don't think about it, but then it adds to the juxtaposition. It's like, here's jazz guitar and here's, here they are in their blue jeans and their, their crumpled hats and, all the...
Perry Botnick did it for the first 2 years, and then after that, it must have been Howard Roberts and maybe Tommy Tedesco and maybe even Barney Kessel or other guys like that played these little cues.
Yeah.
And they were just these, what a jazz guitar player. Say, give me 30 seconds, Howard, and he would go, play a little chord melody or something. Yeah.
And I've noticed that you mentioned George Barnes, who was another one of the jazz players that played with a clearer, brighter tone, especially for the jazz guys that tended to have the really thuddy sound. He had a really clear sound where you could really hear his chord voicings and everything kind of was clear.
I don't know when that dark thing happened, but Charlie Christian had a slightly dark sound, but all of those early guys, many of them had a relatively bright sound. Howard Roberts had a bright sound in the 60s. Before that, Wes Montgomery certainly had a fairly bright sound. He had quite a bright sound, then he's toned it down. I'm not sure when, maybe with the prominence of Jim Hall and certain of the darker players, but I've always liked to hear the angels singing. Yeah. So I don't use flat wound strings, I use round wound strings, and I have a relatively bright sound, not hugely bright, but I mean, I can make it bright on this thing.
Yeah. So I guess that kind of gets us into the whole, Telecaster thing, which, there's this whole, now there's this whole, kind of school of jazz Telecaster players. And, I guess it goes back to, I guess Ed Bickert would probably be one of the first that was really doing, because of course you had the jazz guys that had a Telecaster that would use it on rock and roll dates.
Right.
But
then the studio guys, Barney had one, Herb had one, Howard Roberts had one. Yeah. John Collins was given an early Telecaster to play with Nat King Cole, and it didn't last very long. I don't think there's any film of it. There's a picture of him holding it.
Is that the one that's white with all the gold-plated parts and everything? Yes. Yeah.
And of course, there's Jimmy Bryant, who was ostensibly a country jazz player, and he used the early broadcasters from an early time. But the Telecaster, funny little thing. Didn't catch on in any of those worlds really in the 50s.
Yeah, it took a little while to catch on. Yeah. But so you have kind of, and it's amazing because it would be easy to lump into where it's like, okay, these are the, Telecaster jazz guys, and they all sound the same. But they don't at all, because there's a huge difference between the way Ed Bickert versus Bill Frisell versus Julian Lage versus, all these other cats.
Yeah. I mean, and then the hybrid cats too, like Jim Campolongo can play jazz. Yeah. He doesn't, but he's a jazz-inspired and influenced guy, and he's a straight-up, telly guy.
Yeah, he's going to bend the neck and
and I mean, there's lots of guys who are just more comfortable in the Telecaster, regardless of what style they're playing. But you're right, it's not a guitar that gives you one thing.
Yeah.
We know that. You're the Telecaster maven of the world, and you talk about it a lot. And
I do. I'm fixated on it. I'm obsessed.
Oh, and one of the characteristics, I mean, you can often tell a Telecaster when you hear it. but it doesn't necessarily predict a certain approach.
Right.
You know, I mean, there's plenty of great rock and roll records that have Telecasters. Lord knows there's, you know, country things and
R&B.
and yeah, the R&B R&B is probably the first place they really caught on.
Yeah.
You know,
Because that was an audience, you know, the players were willing to gravitate to it more because they weren't worried about, they wanted to make a statement.
yeah.
And they weren't so worried about being, you know, compared to the guys that had arch tops that were called it a boat paddle or something like that.
And tonally, though, to fit into a big, the Philadelphia sound, or even earlier, these really richly produced records, you know, you needed at least this. And you're not going to get that out of an ES-175 with a flat one strings, you know, not necessarily, you know.
So what brought you to the Tele?
Couple of things. Roy Buchanan's Livestock,
Yeah.
great record. And Ted Green and Ed Bickert. I always just loved it. I would fantasize about it, you know. I got a Les Paul type guitar early on, my first kind of really good guitar, electric guitar. And it didn't seem like a good fit for me. Tried various things. When I got a Tele, I was like, oh.
And there's something about, because, you know, for a lot of guys, they feel like the bridge pickup is kind of like the business end of a Telecaster.
Right.
But there's really so much that the guitar has to offer
North of there.
North of there. You know, because of how kind of it just has this resonance and this solidness to it, this solidness to the note when you hit it. It has an assertiveness to the guitar. Even if you're playing on the neck pickup, you don't have to be playing James Burton licks on the bridge pickup.
Right. And we should clarify that the neck pickup on a Tele is wonderful. I'm very comfortable with it. I don't need these funny things necessarily to do my thing. I have a beautiful Nocaster that has a beautiful neck pickup on it that I use all the time too. But that means with modern wiring, you know, the neck pickup without the dark circuit.
Without the dark circuit.
And it's funny, there's two kinds of guys. There's two kinds of guys with Telecasters. One guy sets the amp up so that it sounds good with the bridge pickup. And then the neck pickup is a compromise.
Right.
Usually. And then that's why we hear things like, wow, the neck just sounds so whatever. Yeah, because they made the back pickup sound really good.
Yeah.
But notice I call it the back pickup.
Yeah.
And then there's guys that dial it in so that the neck pickup sounds really good. And then they do something like roll the tone down and bypass the tone circuit on the, you know, all these tricks where you don't have the neck pickup through the tone pot so you can control the back sound. Or then there's other guys that just use all of it. Like Roy Buchanan used the whole thing.
Yeah.
You know, his neck pickup sounded beautiful.
And it's that the documentary that they did about him, where they're really showing off his versatility, and they have him, you know, playing, you know, Misty
with Mundell Low.
Yeah, with Mundell Low, which is just Mundell was amazing.
Mundell was actually quite supportive of. Shout out to Misty.
Yes.
Earl Garner, yay.
Yeah, and Lenny Bro. I mean, because isn't that where that kind of harmonics thing comes from? Doesn't it come from him, or does it come from...
there's a little story that he told me, is that he had heard Tel Farlow play this way with a pick between the second and... he would put a pick here, and then he would touch... on single notes...
Yes.
And play bebop solos that way.
Yeah.
And so then he heard that because he loved Tel Farlow. Then he heard Chet do that, which is what I call pairs. He turned a sixth into thirds just by doing this. Right? But he didn't do the rippling. Mm-hmm. I think Lenny is the one that did the rippling, this one. That sort of, I learned it from, I think the first thing I learned it from was a Guitar Player magazine thing. Then I met Lenny and he showed me other things to do with it. And then Ted Green really took it maybe at least as far, if not further, than Lenny. And he showed me some things to do too, like the chime chords, where you just make an octave out of the bottom note and it makes an inversion. So this chord becomes this chord. And you just do it on the... So that's another thing. I love it. And it's gotten quite popular these days, and a lot of people use it as a little party trick, to sort of look mom, no hands kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so what I've taken upon myself is to try, and as best as I can, to just incorporate it into the whole flow of the music and not have it be something special or even really noticed.
Right.
Except for how beautiful it is. Because it is a nice thing, Yeah. It's you're holding down a chord. Let's see you say. And you're holding down the chord and it's not interrupting the flow. You're not going, right? And it turns a chord into a scale, basically. Yeah. So it's a really nice technique, and it sounds particularly good and churchy and beautiful on a Telecaster.
It does. It really. Yeah.
There are some guys that do it really, really well, and it's always beautiful to hear.
And again, that's one of the advantages of the guitar is it really has an assertiveness to it, and notes kind of ring out well. They may not be as warm and mid-rangey as something as you might get otherwise.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, mid-range is tricky. Mid-range cuts through mixes, and that's often why we like those kinds of sounds. But for a solo guitarist, I like it softer in the mids.
Yeah.
It's a little more forgiving, and I like the melody to stand out. I like the bass to be warm, and I don't want the middle voices to be overpowering sonically. I might play something that has. Get back. I'm sorry if I'm playing different volumes. You guys can figure that out. So I'll play that kind of and I want those middle voices to be supported like a cheering section, but I don't want them to overpower.
So one of the things that's really daunting, like there's a lot of people that are watching you play right now, and it's like you are speaking in a foreign language. And I'm not talking about what you're saying, I'm talking about what you're playing.
Yeah.
Because a lot of guys, maybe they come from a blues or an R&B or a heavy metal or whatever kind of background. So the guy that's wanting to learn, like, let's just take chord melody.
Okay.
And what would be kind of like the entry into chord melody where you're like, I'm a guy that either you're a country guy or I'm a guy that's playing power chords and stuff like that. What do you feel like how do you get started into chord melody, like in the most basic kind of way?
First of all, listen to music that you can play that way, whether it be the Beatles or Cat Stevens or Frank Sinatra or a jazz tune or not, right? So I don't really think of it. The word chord melody is a little bit of a misnomer because it suggests that everything's about chords and the melody sort of stacked on the top. I just think of it as playing a song by yourself.
Okay, let's change that then. Let's say solo guitar.
Yeah, and I don't mind chord melody. It's not wrong. Everybody knows what it means,
Right.
So solo guitar, unaccompanied guitar, and playing a song. So, you have a song that seemed like it would work. Let's say that's the situation. One thing I would suggest learning is how to play triads all over the fingerboard. And one great way to do that is to take a major scale at first, because you know it better, and take a triad, that's a D triad, right? And then harmonize that up the key. And so that's a D major scale, harmonized with a third underneath it. And then maybe make some melodies around that, like. the neighborhood around each of those stations along the way.
Yeah.
And that can help you whether you want to play nice fills for a singer-songwriter or jazz or whatever it is. You know, so learn the lay of the land via triads. And not on just that one set of strings and not in just that one key. So you were going to say?
No, keep going.
Okay.
You're flowing.
Okay, so now that sounds fancy, but it was just triads, right? And then if I play, that was also triads. So it doesn't have to sound all fluffy like the first thing I did.
Yeah.
You know, and you can learn about voice leading. By playing a 5-chord in front of each of those triads. So you start to learn about the way a piano student would learn how to play piano. They learn little pieces, little triadic pieces. And we often skip that step and we go straight to whatever, you know.
Yeah, we go
crazy trainers.
Yeah, we tend to be either I'm strumming a chord, I'm hitting a power chord, or I'm playing a solo.
Yeah,
or I'm playing a line.
And then there's all this mythology about triads, like, well, Larry Carlton sounds really cool, and the way he does it is he's playing triads. And people don't often know what that means. Yeah. He's using triads melodically. But I just mentioned this, popped into my head, Crazy Train, right? But the main riff, after the is, you know, it's triads. I can't remember exactly how it goes, but that thing that the kid played on there was basically
Randy Rhoads.
Randy Rhoads played this cool triadic thing. You know, so they're all over. You can play great R&B. A lot of stuff that all the R&B guys played is triads.
It's all
over the place.
Chord voicing and triads.
And we need to know those. And every fancy chord, every expensive chord, like for instance, if I do the same thing with a D scale using 7th chords, like D major 7, E minor 7, these are what people call jazz chords, right?
Yeah.
But every single one of them has a triad in it. That's just with a different root. So it's really good that if you're going to learn one thing about so-called guitar music theory or whatever, learn how to play harmonized triad scales. It's really great, major and minor.
Yeah.
Then the next thing, when we actually put that into use, is take a song that you want to learn how to play. Can I use that?
Yeah.
Play that much of it. So you want to learn how to play Misty. It's a great song. It's great to know. It's a good solo guitar. Most people know it. So you learn the melody on the top 3 strings. And learn it beautifully. So if you were a saxophone player or somebody singing it or whatever. And then the next step, make a duet out of the roots of the chords. Roots and the melody. Looks like I'm playing chords, but I'm just playing the outside tunes. Yeah. Okay. Then when you do that, maybe you can then add fifths. I'll put a flat fifth. But the fifths are moving.
Yeah.
Right? Then when you do that, you've created a scenario where your hand is in a particular location, the melody's being sung beautifully, the bass notes are the roots and fifths of the chord. Then the cheering section is if it's not right under your fingers, you can't do it. So you say, okay, let's fill in the middle. And I was already doing that, so why don't I just put the rest of my fingers down and play that chord? Maybe we can do a little bit of fill there. intervention to get where the melody sort of stops. And then I want to do a little funny thing that I learned from Art Tatum or something like that. But so the thing that sets you up for success is don't start with chords. Start with melody, add bass, make a beautiful duet, fill up the spaces with maybe a little movement if you can hear it, and then find out from this framework what notes can I put in, and then you have a good start.
So one of the reasons I wanted to ask you this is because I found out that you recently created a website for some teaching. So tell us about this.
Okay, thank you for asking.
Yes.
The website is timsguitarworkshop.com. No apostrophe, just straight letters. timsguitarworkshop.com. You can get there by going to timlerch.com or going straight there. It's a subscription website, and for the first time I have something that's substantial enough to put all of my teaching interests, all my musical interests in one place. So we have a blues vein that you can follow, we have a jazz vein that you can follow, we have a theory vein that you can follow, an essentials and basics vein that gets you prepped for whatever else comes next. And I have a team, which is really cool because they can write stuff out for me. So I just, the way it works is I make videos and teach the way I like to do, and then instead of having to write it out myself or do the tedious work, there's a guy and he's really good at it and he writes it out, and then they put it together with Sound Slice most of the time. So there's a video, and then underneath the video is the tab and the notation, and we have a forum where people can get to know each other and team up or do collaborations and whatnot if they want to. They can also answer each other's questions. And so someone might ask a question on the forum, and I'll see that it's there, but I know that if I wait one day, maybe somebody else will answer the question well already.
Yeah.
And so
that's even better.
Right. It's not to get me out of work. I'm happy to answer it, but it just creates more of a community feeling. And I might learn something, from hearing somebody explain something that I didn't explain. So it's a great thing. I really am digging it, and it's still new. We still have a little bit of a discount on the entry price, and it's like a lifetime discount on the price. I think right now it's $19.99 for a month, or there's a yearly price as well. You can find out about all that stuff.
Yeah. Well, give us an idea of what are some of the more the I guess simpler concepts that someone can begin with, right. And then maybe some of the more complex stuff, so people kind of have an idea of the breadth of.
Well, we've been working on getting all the material that we need to sort of have a foundation, and then I'm going to keep adding stuff every week. We have a song of the month, and I create a lot of content based on the song of the month, so that's really good too, because people can be working on it, how to accompany, simple parts like just the basic chords. Okay, how do you play a bass line and a chord together, or how do you solo over this, or what's some simpler soloing concepts, and they always ask me, what are you thinking about? And I always say, I don't think about anything when I play, but when I practice I think about this and that and this. But I have a basics section, and I may lean more toward preparatory material, because I realize, like your original question suggests, a lot of people have gone that far with it, and I think some people think, I'm going to learn jazz because I need to learn theory. And they don't really care about jazz so much, but they want to know about chords and scales and stuff. And that seems to be the way it's presented. I just want to celebrate the music that I love, the great old songs, improvisation about those great old songs, blues of different styles than maybe our most contemporary right now. So it's really quite a broad thing. If someone never played chords in their life, they might want to do a little work before they join. If someone's never played like solo guitar, I think that there's enough material there to get them started. This thing I talked about, triads, there's a whole section about that. And it will be more, because I believe in it so much. Yeah. The harmonized chord scales with seventh chords is a big section there. We have primers about learning how to improvise. and learning how to have the building blocks in place, then realizing that the building blocks are not it, right? I think that's something that gets missed as well. And having someone sitting in front of you on the screen who can really turn an arpeggio into a melodic line,
Right.
is, I think, very helpful, and who remembers that that's important and often elusive.
Something has to go beyond an exercise.
Exactly.
It has to become music.
Right.
And that's yeah.
And that's why I'm glad to have a wonderful transcriber, because so much of, for instance, jazz vocabulary lessons is just straight 8 notes. Like, okay, play this scale, and play this arpeggio.
Right.
And it's not very interesting, and it sounds academic, even if it's played, beautifully. It's still not quite there. So I can play just as I play. I might tone it down a little bit in terms of the concept. I might I tell myself at the beginning, okay, keep it simple, Tim, make it melodies, Tim,
Yeah.
And then it gets written out, and it's got all these little nuances and diblios and fiblios that I kind of can't help but do, that are in there. It's from the very beginning, So if you say, if I'm going to do Misty, now that's okay, but it's not how I play. So I might say, take this, right, an E flat major arpeggio, and play. And then all those were arpeggios and scales, but it turned into music because of the
Phrasing and the expressiveness of it.
Right. So I tried it to, and then someone would say, "Well, what were you thinking about when you're doing that?" And then I get a chance to explain what I wasn't thinking about, what I might have thought about while I was practicing how to get there, and all those kinds of things. And so it's an organic thing, and I'm in it. So I'm not just posting something once a month and then leaving and coming back. I feel like I want to be in it, in the mix with everybody.
Yeah. I love the touch that you have with the guitar.
Oh, thank you.
I love, you pull such a great tone out of the instrument. You have a lot of, expression. And that's something that takes a long time to gain, because there's so much of a mechanical aspect of learning how to play a song, and then learning how not just to play the notes, but to have expression throughout it. And it's like, how long am I going to hold on to this note, and how hard am I going to hit it, and all these other things. Am I going to have a little vibrato to it? Am I going to play it straight? What am I going to do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I equate it to singing. And the other day we were doing a fun thing, a workshop, and I whistled a little melody to the guys. And I said, when I whistle it, you whistle it back to me. And I whistled a little, kind of quasi-jazzy little phrase, and they whistled it back. And I got a little bit more rich with it, and they whistled it back. And they did great. Almost the whole room in unison whistled back the idea. And then I said, well, how did you do that? Nobody knows how we do it.
Yeah.
I mean, you could go in and say, well, your such and such a cavity goes in the tongue and blah, blah, blah. But even if you know all that, you still don't know how you heard that sound and managed to get your body to just whistle it right back out in tune, in pitch, right?
Yeah.
We don't know how to do that. If someone starts singing Happy Birthday and the whole room joins in, there might be a few outliers that don't know, that have bad ears or something. But mostly people can do that. If you start singing Happy Birthday in one key and you go, wait, let me start higher, and you start singing it in another key, almost everybody's going to get it.
Yeah.
And it's like, whoa, key change, oh my God, So I think that we want to try and teach ourselves to play guitar as close as we can to how we can hum or whistle. And so there's a method that we need to learn about where stuff is, but then there's also another method, which is, for instance, if you're trying to learn a lick or a melody, sing it first.
Yeah.
And then you got the greatest slow downer ever, ba-do-day, right? And you probably don't sing it, tap, tap, tap.
Yeah.
Right? And so you turn this, something that might sound like this when you're first learning it, and you sing it, ba-do-day. you know, and then it's musical. It's more musical because we've been probably singing longer. A lot of musicians don't believe they can sing. I can't really sing very well, but I sing all the time, you know? And we earlier, before we started, we were singing. It was fun. You know? So thank you for noticing that. And what I really just try and do is make these things go beyond the mechanical, or at least take the mechanical toward ever closer toward the musical. You know, and I don't use fingernails, so I use flesh. I sacrifice speed sometimes, although I can do okay, you know, fast tempos with just my fingers. But I really want to make every note have some personality and its own volume in relationship to the other things. And so I put a lot of energy into the right hand particularly. But the left hand has to do, I mean, you have to be able to plant the note and really have it solid in order to get a good tone out of it. Right?
Absolutely.
So it's both, and I care about it. And I think, this is my sort of intuitive idea, that as soon as you start thinking about your tone will start getting better. And until you do, it won't. And you can chase knobs and stuff, and pedals and string gauges and everything else. But until you start imagining the beautiful tone that you want in your imagination, in your mind, it's not the tone from a record. It's actually the tone of your perfect guitar. Then that's when your tone will start getting better, I think. You know, if you have the patience for that. You know.
Let's talk kind of tone and you know, kind of gear and just because there's things that you kind of learn about yourself, and you learn how that you like a guitar set up, and you learn, like, you know, we were fortunate enough to have a dinner the other night with Dan Strain of Dan Nocaster Guitars, and so it was a nice, you know, fun, you know, conversation, and you know, you talked about, you know, getting that guitar, and no matter what, there's always these little things that we do to guitars because we want to get it so that we're comfortable on it, so that we're able to make music instead of trying to get comfortable
or being distracted by some sort of deficit or something. Well, I have a recipe for the external, and I have a concept, at least, and a philosophy for the internal, and try to find a way for them to meet. So on this guitar, this is a Fender custom shop Nocaster from about 2000. It started out its life as a closet classic, and I've been chipping away at it ever since.
I love this. There's some wear kind of on the upper back side that's really nice.
This here?
Right there.
Yeah,
yes.
that's just chipping. But it's black because this is my solo guitar. Yeah. And it's a black suit that turns it that color. It's on the back and stuff, and it's all checkered and stuff. I cleaned the neck for a long time. I didn't clean the neck, and everybody was yelling at me when you looks like you're going to get hepatitis. Come on, clean your neck.
It's got too much growing on it.
Yeah, and so it gets. But I learned that it has its charms. But it's got a fairly large neck, as you can see. It's like 0.96.
Which is quite large because, you know, a lot of old necks, you know, even back in the early blackguards, are usually about, you know, 0.87 up to about like 0.92.
Yeah, right.
There's not that. There's very few that are that.
Put your hand on that.
Yeah, I mean that's. I
mean, I like it to fit into this thing.
Yeah, and it works.
Yeah, but the thing that I like about it, and you know, I feel like it's hard to run if you're squatting.
Yeah.
So I figure opening my hand up and having a little distance between my thumb and my fingers helps me to do what I do. Also, I like it so that it doesn't change size very much as it goes up.
Right.
So it's not highly graduated, it's subtly graduated.
And it can't really get that much bigger when you're starting at like 0.96.
It's about,
then you might get up to 1.
Yeah, right.
You know?
It's about 1.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. I like it, and I like the neck to be very straight, and I like the action to be quite low, but I use 12, 16, 20, 38, 30, whatever is on this thing. It ends with a 54.
Okay.
So it's the D'Addario set that has a wound G, but a 12 to 54. It's just regular round wound strings because I like there's something about this kind of sound that I just love.
Yeah. It's not boingy, but
Yeah, and the angels are singing, but it's not. Dude. The flat ones, especially the bass strings, they feel good and they sound cool, but for rich harmonic stuff, they don't have it.
because all they give you really is the fundamental.
And that's why people like them.
Yeah.
That's why they sound good in the mix, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I understand that. I never really liked them. I tried them for years. So, relatively close action. I mean, is that close action?
Yeah.
Yeah. Then these pickups are Lawler Charlie Christian pickups, and they're wired so that they're similar in wiring to a Stratocaster. So right now, because of the noise, Nashville's kind of a noisy town, you know.
It is. They've got some funky wiring around here.
I don't usually have this too much trouble, but I put it in both pickups on so that it's hum canceling.
Yeah.
And it's not quite as quacky as a Strat, but it's a little bit of that.
Yeah.
Which the harmonics like it, because the harmonics don't like it when you only have one source. They like it when it's for two sources. And this is the Lawler BS, which I think is basically the guts, similar guts. And then on this guitar, I have a pole pot, which I can get all three together or the outside too.
Yep.
So if it ever needs to sound more like a Telecaster. And it's in a whole range of tones. There's videos on YouTube that have me demonstrating all the different tones. But that's my thing. I usually use a Princeton. We're playing a beautiful Headstrong little King, and it's a great sounding amp. And I try not to play too loudly because there's something happens that most people like where something extra comes in. There's an extra, mojo in the soup that you get when you turn the amp way up.
Yeah.
I find that to be a little distracting for me, and so I prefer to play quieter. But I can crank it if I have to, on a blues gig or whatever. I love that.
And like fret wise, do you like bigger frets, small frets?
These are StewMac mediums.
Yeah.
0.052 is the number of them, and I like them because they're bigger than the flimsy ones that come on the guitar.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't like to feel the wood real strong under my fingers. Although I don't like jumbos either.
Right.
Real tall isn't so good. So I think these are about as wide as like a 6150 or something like that, but they're just a little bit lower. I can't remember the microscopic numbers. But yeah. And then usually, I haven't had any fretwork done in a while. Mike Lull, who's recently departed this planet, used to do a thing where he would do a fret job, and then above the 12th fret, he would flatten the frets a little in the center. Not the wood, but just so that I could get a little bit of more clearance for bending strings. I don't bend much on this guitar because of the heavy strings.
Yeah.
My other guitar, if I'm playing a blues gig or an everything gig, or never know, if I don't know what it's going to be, I have another Tele similar to this without the middle pickup with 11 to 50, that D'Addario set that's called Balanced Tension.
Yeah.
It's got a 19G. That seems to be a good compromise. So I'm not going too crazy with the difference. And I used to tune this guitar down a half step all the time. And I stopped doing that. I love the way it sounds, but since I stopped doing it, if I do it, it seems a little soft to me. And it kind of messes me up a little bit, especially on a long gig where as the gig goes on, you start pushing a little harder and stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's the story.
Yeah. One of the things you were saying the other night was that, you kind of have a preference for saddles and like.
Oh yeah, I forgot. I love Glendale saddles. There are these compensated saddles that just feel right to me. I got used to them. I've played some other ones that are fine too.
Yeah.
But they look cool. They look good. And the screws don't stick up. That's a real crazy making thing for me. And they're compensated, so you put them on, tighten them up till they meet each other, and it's almost always perfectly in tune.
And you like brass saddles?
Yeah, I like brass. Yeah. And all the same. I like them all the same because I got used to it. And then Glendale also makes a set that this guitar has called the Deep in Tone, and it's for heavier strings or lower tunings. So you can pull the this string is tilted back further.
Okay.
The low E.
Yeah.
And I probably ought to talk about the other part of it, this internal mechanism of tone making. I put flesh on the string. One thing I like about these pickups, and I look for in a pickup, is I don't like the top string to sound like it should be on a different guitar or has a different tone setting. So I like the top string to have the same girth and as all the rest of the strings. Because I wanted to sing up there, because the melody is often on the top 2 or 3 strings at any given time. And then I have a lighter touch in the middle. My first and second fingers are quite light in the middle, and the thumb is whatever it needs to be. But I try and get even out of a thinner sounding setting, I like to get a nice round tone, and I get it by kind of planting the flesh on the string and pushing down rather than whacking at it or hitting that with a nail or something. So if I play, I want the melody to sing out. I have a little nail on my little finger so that if I'm playing a melody note, it ends up being a little brighter and it's 2 inches closer to the bridge because it, or so. And so that also helps things stand out.
Yeah.
So all that stuff is important to me, the balance, what I call the internal dynamic of the vertical event. It sounds highfalutin, but it just means how loud each of the notes in a chord and the melody is compared to each other.
One thing, I don't want to make you self-conscious, but this is something I've seen in a lot of players where they will make sounds with their mouth while they're playing guitar
all the time. Yeah.
And so it's something that seems to be like connective tissue or something that goes along. But this is a lot of great players do this where they have this, as soon as they start playing, they'll, and sometimes it'll get real.
I do it, and I do it. It started because it's what I think it does. It humanizes this mechanical instrument.
Yeah.
It puts something to your body and your breath through the notes. But I can't sing like George Benson.
Yeah.
Right? But I always sing when I'm playing. And then the grumbling is just me trying to suppress the singing a little bit so that I can, but I definitely connect. People always say, what are you doing with your breath? Are you, what? So, if I'm playing, and it's connected to the music. It's not just sort of random.
No,
it helps me phrase, so I can't sing beyond the capacity for breath. I don't hold my breath. I stay relaxed. I stay in the moment. And I also have favorite, like I love Mose Allison. And you could hear him. He'd say, "And this is how the day dance. Sun is out of the song." And for me, that's just something romantic that I do. But you're right. You notice it, and I think it helps.
Yeah.
I also think that you can't think too much when you're doing that.
I think it helps keep you focused on
right. It keeps your body in it.
Yeah.
And I tend to, some guys are very still. I got to play with some people who are wonderful players and they'd hardly move a muscle. But I'm always like, grooving and moving and not to the point where it distracts me from this action, the activity at hand. But I'd like to feel it, and I feel if I'm not feeling it, chances are you're not feeling it.
Right.
So,
Right. We have to hit on this. So you don't really use a plectrum a lot.
I do, but I play in Pearl Django. I play with it almost all night.
Yeah, and so this is fun. So this is a Fender Extra Heavy that you have a little binder ring on there, and we were talking about it earlier how it gives you something to kind of give you a landmark where it is on your
right. The story on this is I found out that Fender stopped making this size, the 351 in Extra Heavy in tortoise. Panicked a little bit and I kind of put the word out on Facebook. Hey guys, anybody got a batch of those? They tried them, you didn't like them, send them to me. It was such a good response. People sent me picks from all over the place. But then I realized that I had a jar of picks, as we all do, that had been retired because the logo, the embossed logo, had worn off.
Yeah.
And I always put my thumb on that embossed logo. And I thought about it for a second, and I realized I could put something on there, and I decided that these binder rings are, by the way, that's magic.
Yes.
It doesn't have anything to do with the binder rings. If I turn it around, I can also do it. But it just gives me just a thin, and you got to use the plastic ones because the paper ones start to melt, from sweat. But it sticks on there, it stays on there. It doesn't. I don't notice it on a hot day or in my pocket or something coming out, and all of a sudden this thing's over there or whatever. Yeah. It just gives me something to feel with my thumb, and then I gives me sort of, I know my thumb's kind of placed. It's not too precious. I just stick them on there. I don't put them in I don't measure exactly or anything. But it's cool, and so it helps me. I also know if I drop it, I can see it a little easier than if I drop it on the carpet. Sometimes you can't see the pick.
Yeah.
And, so I use the hands by themselves. I use the pick by itself, and I use pick and fingers, or ditch the pick and do all sorts of stuff. It's even when I'm playing a solo gig, sometimes I'll have the pick right there.
Yeah. When you play a gig, do you normally just take one guitar and a small amplifier?
Yeah. And that's always the hardest decision of the day.
Yeah.
What guitar and amp?
Because I know you've got a number of Telecasters and Tele-style guitars yourself, so.
I have a lot of Teles, and I have a growing collection of arch tops because when I joined Pearl Django, they wanted me to play arch top. Yeah. And I like L7s. And, in the search for the perfect one that has the sound and the playability and the look and everything like that, you buy a few guitars. I learned in my old age that they're a lot easier to buy than they are to sell. Yeah. If there's a reason to buy them, you do it for a living and you can write it off on your taxes and do all that stuff, you tend to accumulate some things. So I have a few L7s, and then I have just a few things that are like something I thought always was the coolest thing ever, Yeah. And I don't take them out much. But yeah, deciding what one thing to bring. And lately I've been doing gigs where I might bring a short little pedal board and with a RC booster, a Barefoot Honeybee, a Halo, the Andy Timmons.
Yeah, that's
and a Flint.
Yeah,
because I like I don't use the reverb on the Flint generally. I use the tremolo, and I like the harmonic trim for this one.
It's very
a lot of
nice.
people. I see it on everybody's board, but the whole board's about that big, and it's like one of those little tiny.
Yeah.
And I'll bring that if it's that kind of a gig. With Pearl Django, it's very easy. I have this old Tweed EH-185 looking cabinet with a quilter inside and a 12-inch speaker, and it's easy to carry, and one guitar and off to the deal. Sometimes we walk on ferries to get to the gig on the islands, and because it's so much more expensive to drive on, and you don't have to wait in line so long and stuff. And having something you can just carry on a rollie or just in your hands is so good.
It's so much better.
Yeah. So one guitar. Very rarely do I bring two. Sometimes I bring two, and then usually only use one.
Yeah. Yeah. You have a number of books that you've released through the years.
Yeah, I have 3 books with Guitar Vivo. The first one was made a big splash. It's called the Melodic Jazz Guitar Chord Dictionary. And the premise of the chord dictionary was that we wanted to sort of alphabetize the chords to a greater extent than they've ever been done before. So the way we decided to do that was we would classify and collect the chords by the top note in the voicing.
Okay.
So that you could look up a chord. Let's say we want an A minor 7 chord with a third in the melody, the flat third in the melody. So we said, okay, well, we want to be able to have that chord, and then there's 4 or 5 or 10 different colors underneath that note, and we further refined it by saying that note is on the 3rd string, or that note is on the 2nd string, or that note is on the top string. Yeah. So we could cover all of the A minor chords with the 3rd in the melody. We have this one, we have this one, we have, then we have it up here, and then we have it up here, whatever. Sorry.
Yeah.
And here. So and then underneath the first one's like that chord, basic version of that chord with that melody note, and then maybe, half a page more of colorful chords that would give you the same melody note but have a little, maybe a ninth or a sixth or something in it to give it a little juice or pizzazz.
Yeah.
And it's been successful. And then the second half of the book is, a little more instructive rather than a reference material. And then the second book we made was called Melodic Jazz Guitar Chord Phrases, thinking that, well, you got the dictionary and you probably want to play some chord phrases.
Yeah.
So these sort of melodic 2-5-1s, or we actually started with single chords of all varieties of sound, what we call them tonalities, major, minor, dominant, diminished, and all that stuff. And we played what George Van Eps called chord streams, one chord in many different places with a little that creates a melody just on one chord.
Yeah.
Then we did a whole section on 5-1. Then we did a whole section on 2-5-1. And then 3-6-2-5-1, et cetera, et cetera. Intros, outros, parallel harmonies, sort of these kinds of. Those kinds of moves. I would just sat in front of the camera and played, and they wrote it up and talked about it. And then the newest one is melodic blues guitar soloing, and it's using all the kind of classic stuff, the kind of blues tunes you need to know if you were going to go to a jam session and play and sit in, and just trying to be melodic and not strictly, box-shaped riff full, but try to make melodies. So the emphasis is on learning the melody of the song, learning the actual song melody of the song, and using that as a
concept.
Using that as a platform to sort of build something from it. And that all three of those books are being very well received, and I'm very thankful for. They're available on Amazon, so you could just search my name on Amazon and they'll all come up.
Yeah. Tim, I really appreciate you taking the time to come down here while you were in Nashville, and it was a pleasure to because of course we did back during the old lockdown, we did a Zoom kind of interview, which was fun to do, but it was so much nicer to get to spend some time with you and kind of get to know and hear that guitar, up close and in the room. So Thank you so much.
Thank you, Zach. And I wouldn't have missed it for the world. I'm glad we figured it out because it was a tight trip. But I watch the show all the time. Like I said, I'm in awe of this chair, and how many cool, really wonderful guitar players have been in it, and how really well you interview. I dig it. I mean, everybody should listen to Zach to learn how to have an interview because he's so good at it. And it's really good. So thank you for having me.
You've embarrassed me now. But I love it. Thank you.
Yeah. Well done. Well done. Ask Zach.